Judy Moran, Australia's Mafia Queen, and the horrifying crimes that destroyed her family. Dear friends, today's case is not just a cold-blooded crime. It's a tragedy that engulfed an entire family where guilt, ambition, and death became their destiny. If you're a fan of true crime stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other shocking cases. And now, let's begin the journey to uncover the dark secrets behind Australia's most infamous Mafia Queen. The ghost of Melbourne's underworld. Melbourne, the second largest city in Australia, holds a hidden history that not everyone knows. From the late 1970s to the early 2000s, a bloody war between organized crime syndicates quietly unfolded in its shadows. At the heart of this storm was the Moran family, a name that struck fear throughout the underworld. And the woman behind that name was none other than Judy Moran. Born in 1944, Judy wasn't a born killer. She was once a wife, a mother, but her life took a dark turn the moment she stepped into the world of organized crime. Both of her husbands were notorious gangsters. Her two sons, unable to escape the same fate, were murdered one after another. But what shocked all of Australia wasn't just her past. It was a crime that Judy herself had a direct hand in. And this time, the victim was her own brother-in-law. The shocking murder of Distupinson Moran on the morning of June 15th, 2009, at a small cafe on Union Road in Ascot Vale, a suburb of Melbourne. A middle-aged man walked in, as he often did. That man was Desmond Tuppence Moran, a name well known to both the police and Australia's criminal underworld. As a longtime member of the Moran family, Des had survived countless bloody feuds over the decades. But what he didn't know was that his life would end that very morning, in a place he considered familiar and safe. Moments after Des entered the cafe, a figure dressed in black, wearing a hat and dark sunglasses, approached him. Without saying a word, the stranger pulled out a gun and opened fire. One shot, then several more. The sound of gunfire rang out cold and sharp in broad daylight. Des Tuppence collapsed to the ground, his blood pooling on the tiled floor. The killer fled the scene quickly, jumping into a getaway car waiting nearby. The entire act took only seconds, fast, efficient, and merciless. It was an execution straight out of a classic mafia playbook. News of the murder spread rapidly throughout the city. Melbourne police cordoned off the scene, interviewed witnesses, and pulled security footage from nearby businesses. This wasn't just another homicide. The victim was a veteran figure in Australia's underworld, once a key player in Melbourne's drug trafficking and extortion rings. The public was stunned. Who would dare kill a Moran and do it so boldly in broad daylight in a public place? Speculation erupted. Was this the latest chapter in the long-running internal war among factions of the Moran family? Or was it a calculated hit ordered by someone Des once trusted? Just days later, investigators found their first major lead: an abandoned Holden vehicle discovered in a nearby suburb. Inside, police uncovered suspicious evidence: a brown wig, rubber gloves, a semi-automatic handgun, and traces of DNA on the gun and the door handle. This was no random killing. It was premeditated, with at least 3 people involved and a meticulous plan to eliminate all traces. Through DNA analysis, phone records, GPS data, and conflicting witness testimonies, one name unexpectedly surfaced: Judy Moran, a 66-year-old woman who had already lost a husband and 2 sons to violent crime, now emerged as the prime suspect in the murder of her own brother-in-law. No one could believe it. After all the loss, instead of leaving the criminal world behind, Judy had stepped deeper into its darkness and taken matters into her own hands. A smoldering grudge within a criminal family. One question haunted investigators as the truth behind Des Moran's murder began to surface. Why would Judy Moran kill her own brother in law? To answer that, we must go back to the blood-stained history of the Moran family. Once a dominant force in Melbourne's criminal underworld, the Moran clan stood shoulder to shoulder with Italian, Irish, and South America syndicates operating in Australia. They ran drug trafficking networks, illegal betting operations, controlled nightclubs, and even had ties to corrupt police officers. Judy, who came from a relatively normal background, was married to Louis Moran, one of the most feared crime bosses of the 1990s. Together, they had two sons, Mark Moran and Jason Moran, both of whom followed their father's path into the violent world of organized crime. But power in the underworld is never permanent. In 2000, Mark Moran was gunned down in front of his home. He was barely in his 30s. 3 years later, Jason was ambushed and murdered in front of his young son after attending a basketball game. By 2004, Judy's husband Louis was also killed, shot in a bar in Brunswick. Police quickly determined that his death was part of an ongoing turf war, one of many assassinations in what would later be known as the Melbourne Gangland Killings. And what about Des Tuppence Moran? He was Judy's brother-in-law, but their relationship had soured long ago. Des had publicly criticized Judy and her sons, claiming they had disgraced the family name. In return, Judy believed Des had secretly allied himself with their enemies, contributing to the bloody vendetta that wiped out her husband and children. The pain of losing her family, for most, a reason to walk away from crime. For Judy, it became fuel for revenge. Investigators believe Judy had harbored a deep resentment toward Dees for years. She believed he had betrayed the family, colluded with rivals, and helped orchestrate the bloodshed that shattered her world. And when there was nothing left to lose, when the last of her family was gone, Judy made the choice to eliminate what she saw as the final threat within the Moran bloodline. No apologies, no forgiveness, just one final act, carried out in the only way those who live in the shadows know how: kill to survive, kill to reclaim what power remains. Cold-blooded plan, hiring a hitman to kill. Judy Moran, a woman nearing 70, appeared to the public as a grieving mother who had lost her husband and two sons to the violent world of crime. But behind that fragile facade lay a cold, calculating mind, as sharp and ruthless as any mafia boss. After years of festering hatred and loss, Judy no longer believed in justice or the law. She believed that to preserve what little honor remained of the Moran name, Des Tuppence Moran had to die. But Judy didn't pull the trigger herself. Instead, she turned to a familiar underworld method: hiring professional killers. She chose two men, Jeffrey Nuts Armour and Michael Ferrugia, both with criminal records and reputations for acting without hesitation. According to the court indictment, Judy laid out a precise plan. Armour would carry out the hit. Ferrugia would drive the getaway car, help with the escape, and destroy any evidence that could link them to the crime. On the morning of June 15, 2009, everything went according to plan. Armour approached the cafe in Ascot Vale where Des was a regular. As Des stepped inside, Armour acted instantly, a shot to the head. Des collapsed on the spot. Nobody had time to react. Armour ran out and jumped into the waiting car, where Ferrugia had the engine running, ready for a quick getaway. The entire act lasted less than a minute. It seemed like a perfect plan, but it all started to unravel Because of Judy's overconfidence, just a few hours after the murder, Judy didn't return home. Instead, she and Fauja returned to the scene of the crime. Why? To retrieve the incriminating items: the gun, a wig, gloves, and the disguise, all of which had been hastily stashed inside the getaway car, parked elsewhere. They planned to drive the car to a remote area and burn or dispose of it. But what they didn't know was that the police had been tracking their every move since the shooting. When officers stopped the vehicle, they uncovered a mountain of damning evidence: a semi automatic handgun hidden under the seat, the murder weapon, a wig covered in DNA, which matched Judy Moran 100%, gloves, masks, and other disguise items, bearing Armour's fingerprints. And most importantly, phone records and messages showed that Judy, Armour, and Fauja had been in constant contact before, during, and after the murder. Jeep's data from their phones further confirmed that all three were near the crime scene that morning. Melbourne police knew this wasn't just an isolated killing. They had uncovered a premeditated, organized assassination orchestrated by none other than the Mafia Queen herself, a woman long suspected of pulling strings behind some of Australia's bloodiest gangland killings. At last, the mask of the grieving mother slipped, and the truth was revealed. Judy Moran wasn't just the last living witness to the fall of the Moran dynasty, she was the one who ended it. The trial and final verdict that ended the Mafia Queen. In March 2011, the Supreme Court of Victoria reached the final sentencing in one of the most shocking organized crime cases in modern Australian history. After nearly 2 years of investigations, hearings, and legal battles, the name Judy Moran, once synonymous with power in Melbourne's criminal underworld, now stood before the court, facing the judgment of the law. At 66 years old, Judy appeared frail, with graying hair, a thin frame, and vacant eyes. But what drew the most attention from the public and media wasn't her appearance. It was her attitude. Throughout the trial, Judy adamantly maintained her innocence. She claimed that all the evidence against her was part of a smear campaign, that the police had fabricated the case, and that she had nothing to do with Des Moran's death. As the judge read out the verdict, Judy suddenly shouted in court, "I was set up. I didn't kill anyone. This is all lies by the police and media." But her outrage and denial couldn't erase the truth. The case files laid bare a premeditated, cold-blooded murder, backed by physical evidence, electronic records, and witness testimony that aligned with chilling precision. Justice Lex Lasry, presiding over the trial, stated, "This was a calculated, ruthless, and deliberate act of murder. The accused has shown no remorse and even attempted to mislead investigators with false claims." The court concluded that Judy Moran was the mastermind behind the assassination of Des Moran, a man who had once lived under the same roof with her for decades. The final sentence: 26 years in prison with a non-parole period of 21 years. A harsh penalty, but one deemed appropriate given the grave nature of the crime. The shooter, Jeffrey Noet's Armour, received 12 years as well for carrying out the murder. Meanwhile, Michael Fauja, the getaway driver and accomplice who helped destroy evidence, was sentenced to 4 years after cooperating with authorities and revealing critical details of Judy's plan. Australians followed the trial closely from start to finish. The media called it the final chapter in the tragedy of the Moran family, a once feared criminal dynasty that ultimately collapsed under the weight of betrayal and revenge from within. With the verdict delivered, the prison doors closed behind Judy Moran, signaling the complete downfall of the Mafia Queen who once ruled Melbourne's underworld. No more power, no more influence, only an aged and solitary woman imprisoned by the very crimes she orchestrated. The tragedy of a criminal dynasty. For decades, the Moran family stood as a symbol of power, wealth, and fear in Melbourne. They didn't just control vast portions of the city's underworld, from drugs and illegal betting to extortion and gang operations. They also captured the attention and unease of Australian society. On the surface, they appeared to be ordinary Melbourne citizens, but behind closed doors, they were one of the most dangerous and complex criminal families ever to exist on Australian soil. Then, one by one, the masks began to fall, and one by one, its members fell to bloodshed, betrayal, and revenge. Mark Moran, the eldest son, was gunned down at his own front door. Jason Moran said. The younger son was assassinated in front of his young child. Louis Moran, Judy's ex-husband, was executed in a Brunswick bar. Des Tuppence Moran, her brother-in-law, was brazenly murdered in broad daylight. And finally, Judy Moran herself, the so-called queen behind the empire, was sentenced to prison for orchestrating the killing of her own family member. It could be said the Moran family wasn't destroyed by outsiders. It collapsed from within, a family consumed by mistrust, ambition, and vengeance, where love and loyalty had long since disappeared. What chilled the public wasn't just that Judy planned Deda's murder. It was the calculated coldness behind it. She didn't kill out of fear. She didn't kill out of blind hatred. She killed for power, to preserve the image of an underworld empire that was already crumbling. At the age of 66, when many are enjoying retirement with grandchildren, Judy Moran was led into prison by the same hands she once used to command killers. No more crown, no loyal soldiers, no criminal empire to rule. Only an aging woman, alone, haunted by the blood-stained memories of her past. In the history of Australian crime, few stories are as tragic as that of the Moran family, a family that once ruled with iron fists, once inspired fear, once built an empire from violence, only to be undone by the very force that created them, crime itself. There are no winners in this story. The dead lie in the ground, the living lie behind bars, and those who remain can only look on and sigh. In the world of crime, there is no family, only blood laws, and a price that everyone must eventually pay. What do you think about the story of Judy Moran, the woman who once stood behind one of Australia's most notorious criminal families? Was she the embodiment of evil, or simply a product of a world with no way out? Do you believe she deserved the sentence she received? And if you were in her shoes, what path would you have chosen? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. Don't forget to hit like if you found this story thought-provoking. Comment to share your opinions or feedback on the video. And subscribe to our channel to follow more gripping true crime stories just like this one. Your support is the driving force that helps us uncover and tell the stories that have never been told.